But the head teacher was wonderful. The head teacher absolutely supported it. He said, what I wanted from this was for the kids to recover their confidence after failing this awful bloody exam. And you're doing it. They are recovering their confidence. When we finished the first year, the head said, I want you to take responsibility for all the 7 classes. And another quite extraordinary thing happened. On my Facebook appeared this bald-headed bloke, and he said, I'm Andrew. I was chair of the class meeting in your class 45 years ago. And he said, I want to tell you, he said, that changed my life. He said, do you remember, I was fascinated by railway systems and canal systems. And when my parents came to talk to you on Parents' Evening, in the first year I was at the school, you said to my parents, one day I'm sure he'll get a geography degree. He's so interested in the way systems work and place, the idea of place. And they smiled very sweetly and thought to themselves, you don't go to university from this school, so his chances of getting a university degree are 0. But they were very polite about it. And he said, guess what? He said, I did go to university, I did get a geography degree, and now I'm vice principal of a big elementary school, and we run it as democratically as I possibly can. And I thought, bloody hell. And he said, it's all your fault. And he said, look, what I want to do, he said, I'm still in touch with quite a few people from the class. What I'd like to do is organise a dinner one time. I'll invite them all to my house, and I won't tell them you're coming. And Deb, because she had a lot to do with the stuff we did with this class. We used to go on field trips, and Deborah and my little kids would come. So we did. We went to his house, and he'd invited several of the people from the class, none of whom really I would have recognised if. And they sort of looked at me when I came into the room as if to say, who's that old bugger, you know? We know him. It was an extraordinary experience. And they talked about what they remembered of the class. And it was wonderful. And they said it really, we learned that we could learn. They said, and we really came to believe in ourselves again. He said, do you know what? He said, I remember what I said. The first time we came into the class and we sat in a circle, none of us had ever sat in a circle before. And you, instead of standing at the front, just sat in the circle. We didn't know how to handle it. He said, over the 2 years, because I worked with that same class through the second year, I was responsible for all the other 6 second year classes as well, but I kept my own class. So I worked with them for 2 years. They said, we just learned about ourselves. But the biggest thing, David said to me, he said, I learned how to learn. And I don't think I'd ever really learned much at the primary school, except that I was stupid, couldn't spell, couldn't write properly. And I learned these skills, and the most important one, I began to believe I could learn stuff if I put my mind to it. And I said, well, do you remember what you said on the very first day we met? And he sort of smiled. And I said, well, I'll remind you, because we sat in the circle and I explained to them the 5 subjects that they were going to do with me in our class. I said, history is what happened in the past. Geography is what it's like in other parts of the world. Social studies is how people live together. Religion is what people believe is important in life. And then English is how we communicate. And this kid, David, he put his hand up and he said, that's everything in the world. He said, can we study anything in the world? Or can we study everything in the world? I think he said. And I remember him saying this, and I sort of said, well, I suppose that is what it means, yes. You could study anything or everything in the world. Might take you a little while more time than we've got, but and he remembered saying this, and I remember thinking that's a really astute observation for an 11-year-old sitting in a circle with a new teacher in a big new school. That was really quite something. And then one or two of the other kids began to remember incidents, and I found I kept very, very profuse notes. Every day I'd come home and make pages of notes about what had happened during the class. And I did things called sociograms. I asked every kid to write on a piece of paper the names of 2 other people in the class they'd most like to work with. And what that shows you, if you then plot them on a diagram, you immediately see who's very popular in the class and who's isolated. Because I thought, I don't really want to spy on you. I don't want to mark your work. I might write something very encouraging in a little letter to you after you've been working on a project. But I didn't like the idea of marking, and I didn't like the idea of testing. But I thought this is quite important. I want to know who's isolated, who's finding it hard to make friends. And you can tell if you do a sociogram, you'll probably find 5 or 6 kids in the class everybody wants to work with, and perhaps 2 or 3 kids in the class that nobody wants to work with. And then it was possible to be a bit helpful to them, to engineer groups so that they get into a group, and be a bit manipulative, which Sudbury Valley obviously wouldn't approve of, but I thought it was important. And I also used a reading test surreptitiously, so I could keep an eye on their reading skills. They weren't bad, and I didn't make anyone do the reading test, but it was always there. And I said, if you're bored and you've got a couple of minutes and you want to see how you're getting on, you can come and do the reading test again. And I had a steady flow of kids doing the reading test. And it was very exciting. The reading of the class was improving at a rate of knots, until by the end of the 2 years, most of the kids could read straight off the end of the reading test, which meant that they were theoretically reading at the age of 16-year-olds.